Top 6 Reasons T-34 was worse than you think.
There is no doubt that the T-34 was one of the most significant tanks of World War II. When Germany invaded the USSR, it possessed the most remarkable characteristics in the tank world. It had a 76mm gun, which was one of the biggest and most powerful tank guns at that time. Sloped 100mm front armor that was almost unheard of during that period, and a 500 horsepower diesel engine, whose modified version is still in use in other Russian tanks to this day. However, simply looking at technical specification sheets does not provide the full picture of how the T-34 performed in real-life situations. Therefore, I conducted research and compiled a list of 6 features that demonstrate how numbers do not tell the whole story.
Number 6. The engine.
Then air temperature reached 25 degrees Celsius. T-34's engine was starting to overheat. The air filter was not effective at its task, resulting in power loss, increased fuel consumption, and short lifespan of the engine. Later, the air filter was changed to Cyclone, which was doing a much better job. Besides these minor issues, the tank was burning oil like it was running on it.
Number 5. Ergonomics.
T-34's famous Christie suspension took up a lot of space inside the tank, and combined with the placement of fuel tanks inside the crew compartment, resulted in very cramped conditions for the tankers. The tank had only 2 hatches, a small one for the driver and a large one on the roof of the turret for the rest of the crew. However, the big hatch was heavy, and the latches had a tendency to get stuck, making it difficult for the crew to escape in the event of an emergency. Tragically, if the tank was hit and burst into flames, the crew would often be unable to exit the tank in time, leading to many cases of crew members being burned alive. The fuel tanks located inside the crew compartment were a common cause of fires after the tank was hit.
Number 4. Optics.
T-34 had a very poor quality optics that exhibited defects such as a yellow or green tint and bubbles in the glass. Its reflectors were made of polished stainless steel and only allowed 49% of the light to pass through, making it virtually useless in dusk or down conditions. In comparison, German tankers had optics that on paper had the same characteristics, but because of much better quality of product, in real life, they could see 3 times further. Additionally, the T-34's commander had limited battlefield awareness, as the only way for him to see what happens on a battlefield was a periscope that had a narrow field of view and, again, poor quality optics. Then on the move, the periscope was prone to shaking so violently that it was almost impossible to see anything.
Number 3. Suspension.
The suspension was too weak to handle the weight of the tank, causing it to sit lower to the ground, resulting in worse off-road capabilities and a really rough ride. This not only exhausted the crew, but also worsened their awareness on the battlefield, as the optics would shake even more. To make matters worse, repairing the suspension was a difficult task, as the Christie's suspension was located inside the tank, where the space was very crowded. On other tanks, suspension was usually located outside.
Number 2. Armor.
Theoretically, T-34 had a great armor, but in real life the poor quality of the steel and poor quality of the production meant that the armor couldn't withstand the shots it should have withstood. There were cases that even when the shell couldn't penetrate the armor just cracked because of how brittle it was. To make matters worse, the low-quality production in some cases resulted in around 10% thinner armor than specified.
Number 1. Communication equipment.
Talking about communication equipment, only 1 in 4 tanks was equipped with a radio station for communication. However, even if you were lucky enough to have a tank with a radio, it was no cause for celebration. These radios were highly unreliable and prone to breaking down, with signals frequently jumping around, requiring the crew to constantly search for the right bandwidth. Inside the tank, the noise level was so high that the commander had to literally kick and punch crew members to issue orders. For instance, if the driver got kicked in the head, he knew that meant the tank had to be stopped. It may sound humorous, but in actual battlefield conditions, due to the lack of radio equipment, communication between tanks was supposed to be done by waving flags. Of course, nobody did this as it would have been too dangerous and pointless at the same time. The poor visibility on the battlefield meant that other tanks wouldn't have been able to see flag signals anyway. So, was T-34 a truly bad tank? No, not exactly. Many of its deficiencies were a direct result of the challenges posed by the wartime period. In fact, the only reason it went into full-scale production was due to the demands of war. Unfortunately, the same reason prevented many of its shortcomings from being corrected for a long time. The USSR needed to produce the maximum number of tanks possible, and any changes to the production process could have resulted in fewer tanks being produced. Was it the best tank of World War II? That depends on the criteria you are using to compare tanks. While the T-34 had some significant advantages over other tanks, such as ease of production, powerful gun, and thick armor, its deficiencies, such poor ergonomics, build quality, and reliability, cannot be ignored. Ultimately, the T-34 played a crucial role in the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany, and its impact on tank design and warfare cannot be overstated.